Dr. Ken Ohler, that's Ohler, is a global business executive with Kincentric. That's Kincentric. It's a business unit of Spencer Stewart Company. Dr. Ken Ohler is a global leader involved with culture and engagement in big business. Let's welcome Dr. Ken Ohler.
Thanks, Ed. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So this is our fourth video broadcast, and it's replacing the conference, the live conference idea. And eventually we'll have additional people join us, but it won't be like the old TV show Hollywood Squares where you have all these faces of people lined up. I don't dig that. So it's just going to be me plus one like yourself, or perhaps another throughout a 30-minute time frame as we get rolling in this new product. Ken, you're an expert in company organizational structure and behavior and customer experience in your role as a global leader, practice leader with Kincentric about engagement. Would you please better introduce yourself than I just did? Tell our audience what your specialty is, and then I want to do a deep dive with you into the COVID experience in companies, and also bring in, as we get into our conversation, a discussion with you about assignment management, business travel, and also relocation assignments, and how all of this virus and all the physical distances and virtual assignments, how is that relating to culture? How can the company brand and the culture, what's the identification of the brand in this new environment? So I'm going to turn this over to you for a couple of minutes. Tell us about your role in the company as global practice leader.
Yep, thanks, and thanks for having me. So Kincentric is a consulting firm, and we specialize in driving results through people, and with a particular focus on culture and engagement, leadership, and HR function effectiveness and talent advisory. We do this through a combination of consulting expertise, data-driven insights, and do this through technology that scales our solutions across organizations. My role is the global practice leader for our culture and engagement practice. We focus on the employee experience, unlocking engagement, connecting people to purpose, looking at the employee experience across life cycle events, all the way from pre-hire assessment to onboarding to maybe you're transferring to a global assignment to all the way to the point that you might exit an organization, and all the experiences in between there, and to help organizations understand those moments to best manage them and get the most out of their people for the greatest amount of impact.
So how are executives dealing with this? They must be worrying about money, of course, but also about keeping their best people. And not everybody is good with this communication method that we're doing right now. Mm-hmm. So how are senior leaders in corporate America thinking about the virtual work from home idea? And, that's really going to impact, the virus is certainly going to impact office buildings and office space, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing a lot of work with pulsing assignments with organizations, because what happened was executives really took a step back, and I would say most of the companies that we're talking to, executives really did a really good job of leaning into this and thinking about not only the events and the business pressures that they're facing, but thinking about the employee experience throughout this, that this is a tough employee experience. And depending on who you are in the organization, if you're someone who's in the office, or if you're an essential worker, or so maybe it's an essential worker who can't work virtually, or if you're someone who can work virtually, really wanting to understand what that employee experience is. One CEO I was talking to said, this is a real moment where I'm thinking about employee engagement very differently. I'm worried about how people are doing. This is mission critical for us. And many organizations have been in different stages of thinking about virtual work. Some organizations are all the way at the extreme of sort of no virtual work, thinking that you have to be co-located, you have to be in the office and working together to get the most out of people too. Many organizations were already very virtual already, and we've known from the data that we got back, we've already pulsed over 120 organizations, that the organizations and the people who were already working virtual, not surprisingly, had a little bit better go at it than the ones who were not. But the things that when we think about employee experience, we know that a few things in particular are at the forefront of employees' minds. And that's first and foremost, it's well-being. Am I okay? Am I safe? Stress levels, fear for what's going to happen in the future, or uncertainty around the future. Then there's this concept of connection and caring. Are people still connected with senior leadership, with their manager, with their coworkers? And is it not just connection like we're talking right now virtually, but the human connection that's so much a part of work? There's senior leadership response. Did senior leaders respond fast enough with shutting down offices, and are they getting people the right resources they need? And then finally, there's the support for virtual work itself, the technology, the processes, the infrastructure to make sure that the work is still happening and it's still enabled and frictionless.
So let's talk about senior level managers, executives. They usually have office suite and with a private secretary or some staff right outside the door. How is that going on now? What's, please give me an insight about how the top level is managing themselves.
Yeah, well, I think it's happening a lot like what we're doing right now. Video meetings have never been higher. I mean, we know that there's been big investments from organizations in technology to help keep people connected. And I think one of the things that we're hearing, and there was an article in Bloomberg about since this has been going on, that people are working on average 3 hours more a day than normal. And I think partially it's because they can, that your commute has now been reduced from 30 minutes or an hour in the car or a train to get to the office to the space between your bedroom and your home office. And more meetings are being scheduled back to back. And I think we're seeing a bit of a level of exhaustion from people doing so many video meetings back to back, and the level of work and the same work, but also new work as senior leaders are thinking, not just how do we manage the here and now with the crisis, making some of the quick decisions that needed to happen about office closings and travel policies and things like that. Now it's a shift to what's next. What type of economic contraction might we see? Certain industries have already been hit very hard. If you're in hospitality or certain aspects of retail or travel, those industries hit very hard and already have had furloughs and downsizings and things like that. So lots to balance and think about. And now do that virtually, as opposed to being able to sit around a conference table with a larger team that you might need to make those decisions.
Yeah, well, of course, my business has been heavily involved in producing live meetings in different cities, and that's gone away. And Joanne's, my wife, has been an executive with Expedia for a long time, and not now. So it's crunch time. So I've been reinventing our business to go back to the future, if you will. We used to be in print publishing and on destination information for recruitment and relocation, site selection things. And we also survived by advertising sales. Uh, Basically, I've been in the PR and advertising business since I was 15. So I'm very familiar with how to do all that, but have not been doing it for a long time. But for the past 40, 45 days, I've been relearning, reskilling, and reapplying the old ways to the new world. And it's actually paid off somewhat. And so now I'm really having some fun putting together sales pitches for e-commerce and utilizing our websites, pages, our platforms, radio show, now TV, but also news and information. We've developed our newsroom as a place for articles and information, as well as sales pitches, and of course, banner ads. And according to Google Analytics, interestingly, since March 1, our Google count, our page views, reader page views count in their language is up 492% since March 1 through May 3. So it's like huge. And so now that's giving me fuel. That's giving me somebody else is saying that there's other readers other than me. And so that's going to help me authenticate the idea of companies putting a banner ad to tout their culture or their brand or whatever, ask for an appointment. But because we're getting eyeballs, it's now my job to keep eyeballs and retain them by having good interviews, such as this thing with you and some others I have coming up. So I want to do a deep dive into, you mentioned in a brief, there are 4 specific things that you guys have been thinking about. Could you explain that to our audience?
Yeah, so with the employee experience that we've been looking at, particularly at this point in time, and with the pulses that we've been doing with hundreds of thousands of employees at this point across many organizations, we've been looking at 4 main aspects of the experience to date. The first being just wellness. Are people okay? Are they feeling safe? What are the stress levels like? Is the company looking after their well-being? Being number one. Second being connection and caring. We know that in times of change that human connection is one of the most important things that people need. So we're looking at that level of connection and caring from senior leaders, from the manager, with coworkers. The third being the senior leadership response to the crisis and throughout the crisis itself, like things like where decisions made quickly on office closings, travel policy, other things around communication of what's going on. Even if it may be imperfect at the time because things were moving so fast and changing so quickly. The fourth being the virtual work support itself. How effective is virtual work? And for some organizations that were already there, it was pretty seamless. And for other organizations where it's been really new, it's been a little bit more difficult. One of the things that's been really interesting that we've seen in the data across tens of thousands of employees already is that the positive perception so far has been really pretty high, like 80% plus favorable responses across these areas. We think that a lot of this might be just sort of the initial shock of the system as people are going through the change process, and that it's likely a lot of this is not sustainable. And in fact, we have some data indications already in what we're getting back, that the workload and the stress is starting to wear on people, and that's sort of where we think the next few months might start to get tough as companies and employees proceed through this.
So this is not just from work; it's from having partner at home and perhaps kids, and the need to not mind the kids, but play teacher, and as well, eat well or eat better or go out for walks or somehow have a life that helps balance time and energy, and mental health is a big issue.
That's right. I mean, the stress and the workload, the work-life balance has been tested in new ways. I mean, what we're seeing is with many people that have younger kids, and they're taking on the homeschooling as well as trying to get their job done. I mean, this is, and if working from home is new and you've got new technology or new monitors, this is all a new challenge and sort of an endless challenge. I mean, it's always there, and you're in the confines of sharing the same space. One of the things that we're also seeing is that in addition to mental health and wellness and that the stress management side of things, that there are some significant diversity and inclusion elements that are coming up, and primarily when you look at how men and women are responding to this, and we're seeing that women are taking on a lot more of the responsibility of the homeschooling aspect in addition to all the work. So as an example, a couple companies we were looking at in this sort of mid-30s zone of age groups, that's sort of where the highest levels of stress seem to be. Men are mostly stressed out about work and in the home office, and is that working right in the connection with work. Women are also stressed out about that, but also stressed out about having kids and homeschooling and making sure that's going to go well, so that they're both are carrying a lot of stress, but they're experiencing the stress differently.
Yeah. So on our show tomorrow afternoon, we have a psychologist, Dr. Natalie Forrest, and we're going to be talking exactly about this topic. And with her in that show is another doctor, professor of business, Lisbeth Klaus. So we're going to have about an hour discussion, those two and myself, see if anyone else calls in. But we're going to be talking about the stresses at home. And, sometimes, for instance, my voice is great in my ears, and maybe with you, but thank you, but certainly not with the spouse, and all day, all night, And so this business of closeness and proximity is not healthy. People have to get out and have some time apart and find a way to do things.
There's an organization we were working with, and we asked some questions to crowdsource for people that were working from home. This question of what are you doing to maintain and manage your stress levels and your productivity, and going for a walk was the number one response we got, and other things around mindfulness and people being able to still connect with friends and family, and these things were really important, and some of the things that many thousands of employees put forward in terms of things that they're doing and having to think about in different ways to manage their own stress levels and productivity levels.
So let's talk for a minute about something sort of related, and that is the role of the CHRO in all of this. I would imagine, and I'm not in HR, but I'm certainly connected from an outsider's view with a lot of contacts. But at the top level, as Chief Human Resource Officer, Chief People Officer, now more than ever, I would think that that position is taking on huge responsibilities and facilitating communications like never before. Would you agree?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, the CHRO is one of our primary clients. So, from our point of view, yes, I think the HR organization is very, very busy, and you know, it's been ranging from crisis management to employee outreach to furloughs to layoffs to implementing wellness programs and wellness apps and managing the virtual work experience. And that's just been in the last few months. So we've been seeing HR really being elevated in terms of importance as organizations are managing this really this tough time. What's even more important is you know that this is not over. I mean, this is just sort of this stage of the crisis, and the question now. And we're actually launching some research next week with HR professionals on what will the post-COVID employee experience and talent world look like. You know, there's this question of what things were companies already working on, like creating a more caring culture or going virtual or going digital, that have just been accelerated and will never go back. What things may go back to normal? How are HR executives thinking about the talent strategy differently? Which talent segments matter? I mean, traditionally we thought of people like high potentials, leadership pipeline leaders, customer-facing employees. Now we're thinking in terms of essential and non-essential employees, virtual workers, and how these things cut across those traditional talent segments. And you know, one organization we're working with right now, we're working with them thinking through what is their virtual talent strategy, because we think that many organizations were already getting signal that many organizations will not go back completely to office work, that they will have a significant portion of the workforce working virtually, if not entirely, but at least in some sort of hybrid capacity, splitting shifts in the office, or some workers going completely virtual and some coming back, but it'll be very, very different. And HR will have to think about the strategies around how you attract and retain and manage and engage talent in that type of setting in different ways.
So let's talk about feedback, engagement and feedback. In the office, I would think most of the conversations between manager and reports, or the population, between HR management and the population in the company, is not recorded. But in this kind of environment, everything's recorded. So I'm not talking about privacy issues, that's a whole other bag, but just the idea of trust and perception of how am I doing? You know, you're my boss, my God, you know, am I going to get a raise? Am I doing something wrong from this kind of a procedure? So could you address that concern and that, I think, a big deal of huge new engagement techniques?
Yeah, well, you know, we just did a poll this morning across a series of talent professionals, a very quick one. When we asked about this concept of what sort of moments and experiences will matter, and which talent segments will matter the most, and leaders and people managers came up as sort of the primary talent segment that will matter, and these aspects of trust and caring also came up in a very big way. And if you think about that, I mean, these things have always been important. I think that they've just been pushed to the forefront because, I mean, just as an example, many companies that maybe didn't have a virtual work from home policy, some of this came from either beliefs that you had to be in the office to be doing your best work. If people are working from home, they're going to be, you know, taking long breaks or not being as productive as they could be otherwise. So that takes a lot of trust and empowerment from leadership to allow people to work virtually at home in new ways. Simultaneously, in return, as you said, you know, the there has to be trust of leadership in return in terms of how the communication is happening and the ability to have multiple people on the same phone call or, if you could, I suppose there's always been recording. Email is always, that's something that can also be pulled, and it's, very well documented and can be pulled. But certainly with video calls like this one, it's as easy as hitting the record button, right? So trust will clearly be pushed to the forefront as managers and employees and work groups work through new ways of working and communicating.
So are you finding that this is not a gut your question, it's just, it comes to mind that, is there a difference in work from home? Is there a difference between male and female of acceptance, of success? I know you touched on it earlier because of home responsibilities, that it's fallen to women in most cases, and that's having an impact.
I think that's the thing we're seeing the most right now in the data. The question is how long will that be the case? Because we sort of have this abnormal situation of all the kids being home from school. So that's sort of the new thing that has to be balanced. And we know that women are experiencing that very differently. We know that women experience work very differently than men across a number of fronts. And that's why I was, before I was saying, I think there will be some aspects of diversity and inclusion that will also be pushed to the forefront. And many of, the forward-thinking companies have already been there for years and been thinking about this in very progressive ways. These things will be harder and harder to ignore, I think, in terms of, at least on the aspects of how men are balancing family responsibilities and women are balancing responsibilities. But there's a lot more around those differences that I think will also come to the forefront as companies lean into this and find some sort of new normal and stabilize.
Let's talk about company culture, the brand, and repurposing or redefining. Is that going on now, or will it go on next week?
I think what we're seeing is I think companies that had strong cultures and a strong sense of purpose, if this is something that should remain relatively constant, that your purpose shouldn't really change considerably regardless of what's going on. So I think that the companies that had a strong sense of purpose, a strong sense of culture, even though the work itself may change, you would want to hold that true and maybe amplify that. And just as an example, like, using a culture model that we have, where you might look at a culture that really wanted to build a culture of learning and caring. And maybe you had that before. Now you've got an opportunity to think about, well, how do you do that even more? And in many ways, this concept of caring has been greatly amplified in this situation, because when people start conversations and you say, how are you, which used to be sort of a throwaway question, now you actually really mean it. And that comes to the forefront, and leaders know, you really have to ask if people are okay. And it's not just a colloquialism or a statement that you start a conversation.
Yeah, but what if I'm not okay? Do I share that with you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we could, we could talk for an hour, I think, but I know you don't have time. But the issue of trust and the perception of relationship, the managers are getting to know their reports better than ever, and everybody's aware of that. And there must be some sensitivity culturally, personality types. Are companies taking extra care to emphasize direction and measurement of performance during this special time now?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things in there. I think this aspect of trust of leadership, I mean, one thing that's been very helpful has been, there's this concept of authenticity that is really helpful with building trust. And more than ever, I mean, just now, I mean, we're inviting people into our homes, right? And we're seeing kids and on video screens, and that has had a positive benefit of building trust. And we hear lots of stories of CEOs that are doing video calls with their entire organization, and you can see family members in the background, or you can tell they're at home, and it's a little bit less of a formal setting than would typically be done in a corporate office. So I think that's a really important part of trust. You asked another question that's also a really important one around performance management. And, I think that in a lot of ways, we've been talking with some organizations about how you even think about performance management in this cycle. And I think a lot of organizations have taken a big step back and thinking, well, if you think about normal performance ratings, and you would say, well, here's meets expectations, above expectations. Like, well, what could the expectations possibly have been ahead of time before this crisis? So I think many organizations are kind of struggling thinking about performance in the rearview mirror of 2019 seems like a decade ago. And how do you think about performance in this current context? The other thing, we were talking with a client a couple of weeks ago about how they were looking at in a traditional 9-box of performance and potential, and all sorts of stories of people that were in the upper right of the 9-box as being, thought of the next wave of leadership, who really just kind of didn't rise to the occasion, and other people who were thought of as just maybe contributors, solid contributors, really went above and beyond and dug in and stepped up in this situation. And so even thinking about the way performance is showing up, and a lot of it, I think, could have to do with personality, and how, the personality predisposition to handle crisis, to handle stress. The concept of resilience has never been more important than ever, and the personality attributes of these things. I think beyond just performance, the style with which one leads has never been more important.
Talking with Dr. Ken Ohler. Ken, why don't you talk to us just a little bit about your company and what your specific role entails, U.S. and worldwide?
Yeah, so Concentric is a Spencer Stewart company, and our mission is to unlock the power of people and teams. We focus on the areas of culture and engagement, employee experience, leadership, and HR effectiveness, talent strategy. We do this through a combination of consulting solutions, data-driven insights, and scaled technology solutions. My role is the culture and engagement practice leader globally. I work with clients, but I also lead the practice globally, contributing to thought leadership, the strategy of the business, product development, points of view, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it's all about the impact that we're driving with our clients, and that's what we're focused most on, is driving results.
And this is just another off-the-cuff question because of my background in public relations and advertising and media. All of this tells a story, and I would think that a company will be repurposing, redoing their advertising campaigns to reflect how they're taking care of people, how they're reimagining organizations and reaching out to customers as people, reaching out to their population, their company population as can't be brothers, sisters, but people, and not just a figure of production.
I think that's right. I mean, we're seeing a lot of organizations, using the phrase "we're in this together" and reaching out to customers in new ways. And the thing we did with our clients first and foremost was to check in and just make sure our clients as people were okay, and how we could best help them. in the current situation. And you know, a lot of the pulsing we've been doing for organizations, we really, you know, we're focused most on the people, and we were thinking for us, I mean, our mission to unlock the power of people and teams, the things we kept telling our own employees were, we're going to go out and get the voice, help companies get the voice of tens of thousands of employees. And if one of those is in a better position through this crisis, that's a great thing. And if one leader has insight that they wouldn't have had otherwise, and to help that company and these people through this process, that is a great thing. And I think that it has reminded us all of the importance of human connection.
One last question, Ken, if I may, thinking about the healthcare workers, first responders, are you involved with organizations who are into healthcare?
Yeah, we do have some healthcare clients. I can't speak specifically to any of those specific ones, but I mean, certainly the first responders and these essential workers, we know that the experience is very, very different. The level of stress is immense. Beyond, and we do know in these organizations, these tend to be people who are very driven by mission and purpose. They do their job for a reason, because not just because it's a job or a vocation, but because it's a calling. It has a higher level purpose, and to have that shift from saving lives to worrying about your own life as you're doing this is a very different experience, and you know, highly supportive of these workers. But we know it's a very different experience there.
Right. Well, thank you, Ken Ohler, from speaking with us today on Global TV Talk Show. Been a pleasure to learn more from you and to do this production. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Ed.
Okay, ciao.